In the previous chapter, we saw that Victor entered Hugo's office, who handed him an envelope containing a warning letter from Colosseo for him. After reading the contents of the letter, Victor asked Hugo if he could talk to him about his late wife Roxana and their daughter Penelope. At first, Hugo exploded in anger, but then he became sad and explained the love story between him and Roxana, and how their daughter Penelope was kidnapped by barbarians while taking a walk. After hearing the story, Victor introduced Pomerian to Hugo and revealed to him that she was Penelope's daughter with a barbarian. Upon knowing this, he became furious as his granddaughter's blood was mixed with that of a barbarian, and Victor began to enjoy every second of it since this was only the beginning of his revenge plan. But to everyone's surprise, Hugo started playing with Pomerian, and after hearing the word grandfather come out of her mouth, he couldn't help but cry and feel happy because he never thought someone like himself would be someone's grandfather. Seeing Hugo crying made Victor wonder why the Hugo he knew suddenly started changing. At the age of 15, after regressing, Victor van Baskerville went to Hugo's office, and suddenly a thought occurred to him when he was in front of him. He began to wonder if Hugo Le Baskerville could be killed. But it didn't take long for him to come to the conclusion that the answer to this question was that killing Hugo was impossible. Those people who had reached the level of a sword master had an unbreakable mindset and spirit. Victor had been looking for any opening in Hugo the times he had seen him, but he had been unable to find one, as Hugo didn't leave any openings even in his everyday life. And years after giving up on killing Hugo, Victor met Pomerian, who grabbed him by the clothes and asked to go with him. Pomerian was Penelope's daughter, someone whom Hugo loved more than anyone else. There still existed a possibility that the emotional turmoil that would occur when he saw Pomerian could even shake the solid heart of the sword master. Beelzebub's skills, the sharp sword, and even Madame's poison made the probability of a successful murder increase gradually as time passed. Today was the day Victor had planned to lay the groundwork for Hugo's assassination. But seeing him playing and smiling while with Pomerian, he didn't know what to do. While Victor was watching this scene, his expression changed drastically as he didn't know why Hugo wasn't confused. A few hours ago, when he revealed to Hugo that Pomerian was Penelope's daughter, he approached her, and while extending his hand towards her, he asked Victor if she was really Penelope's daughter. Victor simply stayed enjoying the moment without saying a word, and little by little Hugo started to bring his hand closer to Pomerian's head, creating tension in the air. Just before Hugo's hand could reach her, she revealed that her mom's name was Penelope. Upon hearing these words coming out of Pomerian's mouth, Hugo was shocked. Pomerian took his hand with both hands and explained to him that her mother had always followed in the footsteps of her father and mother, and so she had also followed them, guided by the necklace that her mother had given her. She slowly began to remember that Hugo was in the photo inside the necklace. She looked at him intently in the eyes and asked if he was her grandfather. Upon hearing these words, he started to remember the image of his daughter Penelope smiling. He was left speechless for several minutes, and then became enraged as he was unable to save his daughter from the clutches of the barbarians. He began to tremble, and while crouching down, he loudly said Penelope's name. Victor looked towards him and was shocked as he couldn't believe what his eyes were seeing. Instead of exploding with anger upon knowing that his own daughter had a child with a barbarian, Hugo closed his eyes and tears started falling like an endless river onto the ground. While Pomerian was holding one of his hands, Hugo put the other hand on the ground and fell to his knees, crying as he remembered his daughter Penelope again. Back in the present, while Victor was lost in his thoughts, Barrymore caught his attention and thanked him. Upon hearing these words, he became confused because he didn't know why Barrymore was thanking him. While Pomerian was sitting on Hugo's lap, he looked at her and with a pleasant smile asked if she liked sweets. She was amazed to see the candies since she had never tasted them before and didn't know what they were. While Barrymore and Victor were watching them, he explained to Victor that he had never thought the patriarch could smile so happily. He also added that everything felt like a dream, as he was witnessing something he could have never imagined. While Victor was staring at Hugo, Barrymore thanked him, leaving him even more confused than before. While Hugo was watching Pomerian eat a sweet, he closed his eyes and started smiling as he felt like he had found something that he had lost many years ago. Barrymore and Osiris also smiled as they felt a peace in their hearts, seeing that Hugo, a person who was never happy, was smiling in this way. Victor clenched his fist and began to tremble, not knowing the answer. Then he relaxed his fist, and while staring at Hugo intently, he realized that he was full of openings. But despite knowing this, he couldn't bring himself to do anything. He started wondering why he felt so helpless. As night fell, Victor returned home and lay down on his bed, staring at the ceiling of his room. The sigh, and with a lost gaze, he began to look at the ceiling and sank into his thoughts. After several seconds, he turned upside down and thought that the Hugo he remembered was very different from the Hugo he had seen today, long ago, when he was captured and accused of treason, while two Baskerville men were holding him so that he wouldn't escape. Hugo appeared and Vicar looked into his eyes and explained that he was innocent. He also asked why he didn't listen to him. Instead of answering, Hugo remained silent, and upon seeing that he wasn't responding to his question, Vicar began shouting and asked if he was really doing this to blame him for all the sins of Baskerville. Hugo simply replied that he no longer wanted to hear anything more from a sinner. He also explained that according to the information he knew, his son Vicar not only had connections with demons but also kidnapped orphans' children and sacrificed them to the demons. Upon hearing this, Vicar became confused and told him that he never did such a thing. And just before he could finish speaking, Hugo drew his sword and in the blink of an eye cut off his tongue. While Vicar was covering his mouth to prevent bleeding, Hugo began to look at him with disdain while sheathing his sword, and ordered him not to address him with his wicked tongue. With a gaze and a murderous red aura, Hugo called him trash because the acts he had committed were unforgivable. While Vicar was covering his mouth, he looked at Hugo with a murderous gaze and exploded in anger, swearing revenge. Hugo was the man who had condemned him to death for all the sins of Baskerville. While Vicar was staring at the ceiling, he began to wonder why he was hesitating to seek revenge. While he was distracted, someone entered his room and asked what that lethargic face was about. Looking in the direction of the voice, he saw Cindy Wendy sitting on the windowsill of his room. While she was taking off her hood and mask, she looked at Vicar and asked him if he was waiting to put his arms around someone. She entered his room and took out an envelope, and while she was heading towards the bed where Vicar was, he asked her why she had come here. She got angry upon hearing this, and replied that she had come to bring him what he had asked for. She threw the envelope in Vicar's face and explained that the envelope contained what he had asked for: the investigation on Setla Baskerville. She sat next to him and asked why he seemed like he had lost the whole world. She also added that she was busy, so she was just going to inform him about what he had requested. Vicar simply stayed silent, listening. Seeing this, Cindy Wendy explained that as he himself had previously told her, she had been investigating Setla Baskerville in detail over the past few days. She explained to him that Set sponsored several orphanages under a false name, pretending to be the godfather and also taking care of the adoption of the children. While Vicar was reading the contents of the envelope, Cindy Wendy explained to him that Set had removed all information about the adoptive parents, and for this reason she had not been able to find out where the adopted children were. She also told him that if he really was a demon like he had told her, then the problem would be bigger. She stared at Vicar, who was reading the report contained in the envelope, and she explained to him that if a demon had kidnapped the children, the purpose was obvious. She revealed to him that the purpose was to use the children as offerings or food. She also added that she came to the conclusion that the disappearance of the children in Underdog could also be related to Setla Baskerville. Little by little, Vicar began to read the reports about Set, and after several minutes, he tightly grabbed hold of the report sheets and thought to himself that he was lost, since this meant that the current Set was the evil one, and that the Set he had served before regressing was also a demon, the person who had given him the information that Hugo was going to incriminate and execute him was none other than Set himself. One day while Vicar was sitting chained in his cell waiting to be executed, Set appeared and with his hand on his face explained to him that Hugo had named him responsible for all of Baskerville's sins, and due to this, his execution was not going to be stopped. Set had put his hand on his face to pretend to be sad, but in reality, he was very happy. With a smile, he told Vicar that he was very sad because there was nothing he could do to help him. After reading the reports, Vicar began to rage and with a murderous look, he thought that the person he had trusted the most was responsible for all his suffering. At the same time, in a forest, where an adult person holding a kerosene lantern and a child were walking, the child addressed the adult as sponsor and asked him where they were. The man holding the kerosene lantern revealed to the blonde-haired child that this would be his new home where he will live from now on. Upon hearing this, the child became confused and started to feel very scared. He looked to one side and while sweating, he told the man that the director had told him that he would be adopted into a good home. After several minutes, they arrived at a cave, and while the man was holding the kerosene lantern to light the way, he revealed to the child that this cave would be his new home. The person accompanying the blonde-haired child was none other than Setla Baskerville. He began staring fixedly at the child and with a smile told him that this must be a misunderstanding. Then he closed his eyes, and his face started breaking into pieces, causing the demon inside him to start emerging. He explained to the child that this cave was not going to be his new home. The demon opened its mouth and revealed to the child that from now on, he would live inside his mouth instead of the cave. Upon seeing the demon's appearance, and while the demon's drool was falling onto the child's head, he began to feel immense terror. This demon had an eye at the bottom of its stomach, and it also had thousands of teeth. The demon opened its mouth and started staring fixedly at the child. The child couldn't help but cry and think about his mother since he was unable to move. The demon slowly began devouring the child, leaving only his boots and a puddle of blood on the cave floor. After devouring the child, the demon transformed back into Set and with a smile thought that, as expected, young humans were the most delicious. While the demon was staring at the cave ceiling, he put his hand on his eye and began licking the blood on his face with his tongue, thinking that he couldn't stop devouring children. This demon disguised as Setla Baskerville was Andromalius, who belonged to the 10 elite corpses of demons and possessed the 10th corpse. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part, don't forget to subscribe and like the video.